Atlantic Ocean holds secrets that no human mind can fully comprehend. And it is a vast and indifferent beast that swallows ships and souls without a trace of remorse. Between the southern tip of Florida and the island of Puerto Rico and the tiny island nation of Bermuda lies a patch of water that defies all logical explanation. This region has become a graveyard for the brave and the foolish alike, where the laws of physics seem to bend and break under the weight of ancient curses. Sailors whisper of sudden storms that appear from clear blue skies, and compasses that spin wildly as if possessed by an unseen hand. The water here is deep and dark, and it hides the wreckage of vessels that vanished in the blink of an eye. It is a place where the horizon blurs, and the line between the living and the dead becomes terrifyingly thin. For centuries, this geometric enigma has baffled explorers and scientists and military commanders who have watched their finest machines disappear into the abyss. The Bermuda Triangle is not merely a danger zone on a nautical chart, but a psychological labyrinth that traps the mind as surely as it traps the body. The ocean floor in this region is littered with the bones of galleons and airplanes and modern cargo ships that dared to cross its invisible borders. There are no distress calls and no floating debris, and often not even a single oil slick to mark the spot where hundreds of lives were extinguished. The silence that follows these disappearances is louder than any scream, and it echoes through the history of maritime disasters like a funeral bell. It is a silence that speaks of forces beyond our control and entities that watch from the deep. The legend of this cursed water dates back to the very first voyage of Christopher Columbus in the year 1492, when he sailed the Santa Maria into the unknown. Columbus wrote in his logs about erratic compass readings that sent his crew into a near panic as they navigated the strange waters. He described a great flame of fire that crashed into the sea one night, and a strange light appearing in the distance a few weeks later. These were not the ramblings of a madman, but the observations of a seasoned navigator who was encountering something completely alien. The glowing white water he described is a phenomenon that pilots and sailors still report to this day. It was the first recorded encounter with the unexplainable energies that seemed to pulse from the very heart of the triangle. The modern era of mystery truly began with the vanishing of the USS Cyclops in March of 1918, which remains the single largest loss of life in the history of the United States Navy, not involving combat. The massive collier ship was over 500 feet long and was carrying a heavy cargo of manganese ore, along with 309 crew members and passengers. The ship departed the island of Barbados with clear weather and calm seas, and everything seemed routine for the voyage back to Baltimore. The Cyclops was a sturdy vessel built to withstand the rigors of the open ocean, and she had performed her duties faithfully during the Great War. Yet shortly after leaving the port, she simply ceased to exist in the known world. There was no storm reported in her path, and no enemy submarines were operating in that specific area. Captain George Worley was the man in command of the Cyclops, and he was known as an eccentric and somewhat troubled officer who often walked the deck in his long underwear. Despite his odd behavior, he was an experienced sailor who knew the dangers of the sea and how to handle his massive ship. When the vessel failed to arrive in Baltimore, the Navy launched a massive search, but they found absolutely nothing. There was no wreckage and no lifeboats, and not even a single piece of wood floating on the surface of the Atlantic. It was as if a giant hand had reached down from the sky and plucked the steel leviathan from the water. The disappearance of the Cyclops remains one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries, because a ship of that size does not simply vanish without a cause. Theories regarding the fate of the Cyclops ranged from a sudden mutiny to a structural failure that caused the ship to snap in half and sink instantly. Some believed that the heavy cargo of ore shifted during a rogue wave and caused the vessel to capsize before a distress signal could be sent. Others whispered of darker possibilities involving sea monsters or paranormal vortices that opened up to swallow the ship whole. The German government denied any involvement, and their records later confirmed that no U-boats were in position to attack the Cyclops. The ship and her 309 souls were gone, and the ocean kept its secret tight. To this day, the fate of the USS Cyclops is a haunting reminder of how small and helpless we are against the unknown. Decades later, the mystery deepened with the story of the Ellen Austin, which was a large American schooner sailing west of the Azores in the year 1881. The crew of the Ellen Austin spotted a ship drifting aimlessly in the distance, and upon closer inspection, they realized it was moving erratically. The captain brought his vessel alongside the strange ship and hailed it, but received no answer from the silent wooden hull. A boarding party was sent over, and they discovered that the ship was in perfect condition with plenty of supplies, but not a single soul was on board. There was no sign of violence and no indication of why the crew had abandoned a perfectly seaworthy vessel. It was a ghost ship floating in the middle of a calm sea, waiting for new victims. The captain of the Ellen Austin decided to claim the derelict vessel as salvage, and he placed a prize crew on board to sail it back to port. The two ships sailed together for a couple of days until a sudden squall separated them and obscured the prize ship from view. When the storm cleared, the horizon was empty, and the Ellen Austin spent days searching the waters for the lost vessel. Just as they were about to give up hope, the lookout spotted the ship drifting on the horizon once again. The captain was relieved and brought his ship alongside again. But his relief turned to horror when he realized the terrible truth. The prize crew he had placed on board had vanished just like the original crew. Fear gripped the sailors of the Ellen Austin as they refused to set foot on the cursed vessel again, claiming it was a trap set by the devil himself. The captain tried to persuade a second crew to board the ship, with promises of great rewards and weapons for protection. Eventually, a few brave men agreed, but they stayed close to the Ellen Austin and kept a sharp watch on the horizon. A thick fog rolled in that evening and enveloped both ships in a suffocating white blanket that dampened all sound. When the fog lifted the next morning, the derelict ship and the second prize crew were gone forever. The Ellen Austin returned to port alone, and the sailors told a tale that would chill the blood of mariners for generations. The most famous incident in the history of the Triangle occurred on December 5th, 1945, involving a group of 5 United States Navy bombers known as Flight 19. The mission was a routine navigation training exercise departing from the Naval Air Station in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The flight consisted of 14 airmen and was led by Lieutenant Charles Taylor, who was a veteran pilot with significant combat experience in the Pacific Theater. The weather that afternoon was ideal for flying with clear skies and moderate winds and visibility that stretched for miles. The 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers roared down the runway and lifted into the air carrying men who had no idea they were flying into oblivion. It was supposed to be a simple 3-hour run to drop practice bombs and return home for dinner. As the squadron completed their bombing run and turned east for the second leg of the flight, something began to go terribly wrong with their instruments. Lieutenant Taylor reported over the radio that both of his compasses were malfunctioning and that he could not determine his bearing. The other pilots in the formation checked their own compasses and found them spinning wildly or pointing in contradictory directions. A sense of confusion began to spread through the squadron as the landmarks below them ceased to look familiar. The islands of the Bahamas should have been easily recognizable, but Taylor reported seeing land that did not match his charts. The calm voice of the flight leader began to crack with anxiety as he realized he had lost his way. Transmissions picked up by the control tower painted a picture of increasing desperation and disorientation among the pilots of Flight 19. One pilot was heard saying that everything looked wrong, and even the ocean did not look as it should. The water below them, which was usually a vibrant turquoise, had turned a milky white color that seemed to glow. The sun began to set, and the shadows lengthened across the cockpit glass as the fuel gauges dropped lower and lower. Taylor believed they were over the Florida Keys. and ordered the squadron to fly north. But his students believed they were east of Florida and should fly west. The disagreement led to a fatal indecision as the 5 planes flew in zigzags across the darkening ocean. As night fell, the weather turned against them, and the seas began to churn with whitecaps that would spell death for any pilot attempting to ditch. The radio signals became fainter and more static filled as the planes drifted further away from the safety of land. The last transmission from Lieutenant Taylor was a haunting command to his men to tighten up the formation. He told them that when the first plane dropped below 10 gallons of fuel, they would all go down together. It was a pact of brotherhood in the face of certain death. And the 5 Avengers descended into the raging black water. They vanished without a trace, leaving behind only silence and static on the radio frequency. The horror of that night was not yet over because the Navy immediately launched a massive rescue operation to find the lost patrol. A Martin PBM Mariner flying boat with a crew of 13 men took off from the Banana River Naval Air Station to search for survivors. The Mariner was a flying gas tank known for its long range and ability to land on water. But it had a reputation for being dangerous. Minutes after takeoff, the rescue plane sent a routine radio message, and then it too fell silent forever. A merchant ship in the area reported seeing a massive fireball in the sky that lingered for several minutes before plunging into the sea. The rescue plane had exploded in mid-air and taken 13 more lives into the darkness. The next morning, the Navy launched one of the largest search and rescue operations in history, involving hundreds of ships and planes scouring thousands of square miles. They searched the reefs and the open ocean and the shallow waters of the Bahamas for any sign of Flight 19 or the Mariner. Not a single life jacket or oil slick or piece of floating aluminum was ever found. It was as if the 6 aircraft and 27 men had flown off the edge of the earth. The official Navy report stated that the cause of the disappearance was unknown. But the phrase causes or reasons unknown does little to comfort the grieving families. The mother of one of the lost pilots famously said that they are still out there waiting for us to find them. In 1967, a wealthy hotel owner named Dan Burak decided to enjoy the Christmas lights of Miami from the deck of his luxury cabin cruiser. He invited his close friend Father Patrick Horgan to join him on his boat, which was named the Witchcraft. The vessel was a 23-foot cruiser, equipped with the latest safety gear and flotation devices that made it virtually unsinkable. They sailed out just 1 mile from the shore and stopped to admire the skyline, which was glittering against the night sky. The water was calm, and the visibility was perfect as they sat bobbing gently on the Atlantic. At 9 in the evening, Burak radioed the Coast Guard to request a tow back to the marina because his engine had struck a submerged object. The call was calm and routine, and Burak emphasized that there was no emergency and no danger to the two men on board. The Coast Guard dispatcher told him that a cutter would be there in 19 minutes to assist them. The cutter arrived at the exact location in less than 20 minutes, but found nothing but darkness and empty waves. The Coast Guard captain widened the search pattern and fired flares into the night sky to illuminate the area. For hours, they crisscrossed the water just a mile from the bustling city of Miami. The Witchcraft had vanished in a window of less than 20 minutes without sending a distress signal. The search for the Witchcraft expanded over the next few days to cover over 12,000 square miles of ocean. The Coast Guard officials were baffled because the boat had built in flotation chambers that should have kept it afloat, even if the hull was breached. Even if the boat had exploded, there would have been debris scattered across the surface of the water. Yet there was not a single cushion or life preserver or splinter of wood to be found. Dan Burak and Father Horgan had simply dematerialized within sight of the shore. It remains one of the most perplexing cases because of the proximity to land and the speed at which the vessel disappeared. Pilots who have flown through the triangle and survived often report a phenomenon known as electronic fog. Bruce Jernon is a pilot who claims to have experienced this firsthand during a flight in 1970. Jernon was flying his Beechcraft Bonanza from the Bahamas to Florida when he noticed a strange cloud forming in front of him. The cloud grew rapidly and seemed to spiral outward like a tunnel waiting to engulf his small plane. With no way to go around it, Jernon flew directly into the center of the cloud formation. Inside the tunnel, the visibility was zero, and the walls of the cloud glowed with an unnatural white light. Jernon reported that his navigational instruments began to malfunction, and the compass needle spun continuously without stopping. He felt a sensation of weightlessness, and time seemed to distort as he raced through the glowing tunnel. When he finally emerged from the other side, he expected to be over the open ocean, but instead he saw Miami Beach below him. The flight, which should have taken 75 minutes, had been completed in only 47 minutes. He had traveled over 100 miles in a fraction of the time required by the laws of physics. His fuel tank was still nearly full despite the distance he had covered. Jernon believes he traveled through a warp in space and time created by the energies of the triangle. Scientists have tried for decades to find a rational explanation for the high number of disappearances in this specific patch of ocean. One prominent theory involves massive deposits of methane hydrates located on the continental shelf deep underwater. These deposits can occasionally destabilize and release gigantic bubbles of methane gas that rise to the surface. If a ship were to sail into one of these methane eruptions, the water density would decrease instantly, causing the vessel to lose buoyancy. A ship could drop like a stone to the bottom of the ocean in a matter of seconds, giving the crew no time to radio for help. The gas could also rise into the atmosphere and ignite in the hot engine of an airplane, causing it to explode. Another natural phenomenon that plagues the area is the presence of rogue waves, which are towering walls of water that can reach heights of 100 feet. These waves appear seemingly out of nowhere in calm seas and can smash a ship to pieces with the force of a falling mountain. The Gulf Stream is a powerful ocean current that runs directly through the triangle, and it acts like a river within the sea. It flows with such speed and ferocity that it can sweep wreckage and bodies hundreds of miles away in a single night. This rapid dispersal of evidence makes it nearly impossible for search teams to find any trace of a disaster. The ocean cleans up the crime scene before the investigators can even arrive. The magnetic anomalies of the Bermuda Triangle have also been a subject of intense study since the time of Columbus. It is one of the few places on Earth where true north and magnetic north line up perfectly, which can confuse navigators who are not prepared. This alignment can cause compasses to misread and lead ships and planes off course into the vast emptiness of the Atlantic. While this explains some navigational errors, it does not account for the mechanical failures or the complete vanishings. There is something more malevolent at work here that hides in the variations of the magnetic field. Some researchers suggest that these magnetic storms can open portals to other dimensions. Far below the surface, near the island of Bimini, lies a strange formation of stones known as the Bimini Road. Discovered in 1968, these limestone blocks are arranged in a straight line that resembles an ancient paved street. Believers in the lost city of Atlantis claim that this is a remnant of the advanced civilization that sank beneath the waves thousands of years ago. They theorize that the crystals and energy devices used by the Atlanteans are still active on the ocean floor. These ancient machines could be firing randomly and interfering with the navigation systems of modern vessels. The idea that we are flying over the ruins of a dead superpower adds a layer of mythic horror to the mystery. The Sargasso Sea is another trap that lies partly within the boundaries of the Bermuda Triangle. It is a region of the ocean bounded by currents rather than land, and it is choked with thick mats of floating seaweed. In the days of sail ships would often get becalmed in this area and sit motionless for weeks under the baking sun. The seaweed would wrap around the rudders and hulls holding the vessels prisoner until the water and food ran out. Ghost stories from the 19th century speak of ships found in the Sargasso with skeletons still at the wheel. The dense vegetation hides the secrets of the deep and creates a floating graveyard that drifts eternally. Despite the scientific theories and the skepticism of the Coast Guard, the reputation of the Bermuda Triangle persists in the collective nightmare of the world. Insurance companies do not charge higher premiums for vessels passing through the area, which suggests they see no statistical anomaly. Yet the stories continue to pile up year after year, with new reports of strange lights and missing boats. There is a psychological weight to the region that affects anyone who travels through it. Pilots grip their controls a little tighter, and captains check their radar a little more frequently. The fear is real even if the monster is invisible. The disappearances have not stopped in the modern age, though they are often explained away as engine failure or human error. Small planes still drop off the radar screens near the Bahamas, and pleasure boats are found drifting empty in the Gulf Stream. The ocean is vast, and it is easy to disappear, but it is difficult to disappear without leaving a single clue. The consistency of the clean vanishings is what keeps the mystery alive. It challenges our belief that with technology and satellites, we can see everything. The triangle proves that there are still blind spots on our planet where we are not welcome. Imagine the final moments of the sailors and pilots who realized they were not going to make it home. The confusion as the instruments failed and the sky turned a sickening color. The realization that the radio was dead and that no one could hear their pleas for help. The feeling of being watched by something ancient and cold that resides in the deep water. It is a lonely death in a place where the rules of reality do not apply. They are the victims of a cosmic game of chance that has been played for centuries. The families of the lost are left with a void that can never be filled because there are no bodies to bury and no graves to visit. They are left with only questions and the gnawing hope that perhaps their loved ones are not dead, but merely gone to a place where time stands still and the sun never sets. This lack of closure is the true curse of the Bermuda Triangle. It denies the living the peace of certainty and leaves them haunted by the possibility of the impossible. The blue water of the Atlantic continues to roll over the coordinates of the lost, hiding the twisted metal of the Avengers and the rusted hull of the Cyclops. The sun shines brightly on the surface, and the tourists play on the beaches of Florida, unaware of the darkness just over the horizon. But when the storms roll in and the sea turns black, the ghosts of the triangle rise on the swells. They are the silent witnesses to a power that mankind can neither control nor understand. The Bermuda Triangle waits patiently for its next victim, eternally hungry and eternally silent.